Good morning and welcome to this week's rant. I've got a different keyboard in front of me at the moment. It's not really coming out in shop. If I just do that, maybe you can see that I have a U20 here. I'll talk about a U20 in a different video. Anyway, this week's rant is entitled, Will We Ever See the Behringer RD-9? And why have I said that? Well, a couple of weeks ago, there were a couple of announcements that hit the wire over the last few weeks. And the first this week was a Behringer post with a photo from the Behringer Skunk Works. Now, I've printed it out, and I will put this up over here, okay? So don't worry about the fact you can't see it very well. But this post read, John from our Manchester office is currently working on our DS-80 synthesizer. So it seems like Behringer are reverse engineering the Yamaha CS80. Now, funny enough, when Behringer put some questions up a little while back about what synthesizers would you like to see, mine was, I'd love to see a Behringer clone of the CS80. And the CS80 is on my bucket list. I mean, the chances of me ever being able to afford it are pretty slim, I think. Especially in my current financial position. But it's still on my bucket list. The CS80 was used to make a lot of sort of the early 80s pop music before sort of kind of the DX7 and the digital revolution took over and everyone went Juno 106, and which wasn't digital, by the way, I know that. But things like Toto, the Toto 4 album, it was Toto 4 with Africa and Rosanna. So Dave Piach did all that, all the synthesizer parts, or most of the synthesizer parts, should I say, on a CS80. A lot of the Michael Jackson's Thriller album was done on the CS80 as well. And I know that because, again, the guys from Toto did a lot of the session musician work on that particular album, so that would have been their go-to keyboards at that point in time. So Behringer also made this statement that the reverse engineering of the CS80 voice board was taking about a year. So that's probably from the last time they said, what would you like, is probably about a year. So they are reverse engineering. And apparently the CS80 employs some unusual VCO, FVC and wave shaper designs. This provides the synth with its unique sounds. They also stated they were hoping to be able to share a mocked up. So what you've got here is you've got boards effectively with what we used to call either breadboards or just patch boards. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember what we call those. They're not breadboards. They're traces where you can knock the traces out. I can't think what they're called now. So I guess this is another watch this space type video. Another thing that happened this week was there was rumours at the beginning of the week that Sequential was on the verge of being sold. So this would be the second time Sequential has been sold. And this was confirmed with a social media post over the weekend. So this is kind of hot off the press. From Dave Smith, stating that he'd actually indeed sold the company. And he'd sold the company for the second time. But this time it was through his choosing, because the first time, I don't know whether anybody knows kind of the Sequential story, but the first time he sold the company really wasn't but through his choosing. It was the fact that the company was almost about to file for bankruptcy. And if Yamaha hadn't stepped in and bought the company at that point in time, Sequential would have gone, and probably the Sequential name would have gone as well. So Yamaha bought the company the first time round basically to save it, and then incorporated the company into Yamaha and we all know that the 22, the SY22 was effectively the last of the Sequential line synthesizer that was unreleased at the time. So I'll do a separate video on Sequential at some point, as the story is actually quite interesting. I found a really good article on Dave Smith. I found a couple of really good articles on Dave Smith in back catalogue magazines that I've been reading over the past few months, so it sort of adds to the colour of the story. Anyway, why is this interesting? Well, the first thing is that Dave Smith is obviously known as the father of MIDI. Although he likes to play it down, he was the person who actually sat down and got the companies talking about this universal interface, which was called something different originally before it became the MIDI interface. So that was sort of one of those things. But the other thing is that Sequential have actually sold out to Focusrite. And some might say this was a bit of a surprise acquisition, because Focusrite are obviously well known for the fact that they do audio interfaces, not synthesizers. Well, actually that's wrong, and I personally didn't know this, that Novation have actually been owned by Focusrite for a number of years. So they've had a synth brand within the Focusrite group. Yes, much of Focusrite is audio and audio reproduction. So the Focusrite brand, the Focusrite Pro brand, Martin Audio, sorry. They are kind of in the stable of Focusrite. But I didn't realise that Novation were owned by Focusrite. So this will definitely bolster their synthesizer presence, I suppose, in this market space. It's interesting that sort of Novation have always been known for their sort of bass stations and their bass synthesizers, although their synthesizers are generally actually quite good. I don't own a Novation synthesizer, but I've got a couple of friends who do, and I've always been really impressed by the Novation synthesizers. Going back over years, I'm not quite sure whether I would say that about the modern stuff that Novation have been pushing out. That's purely because I don't have it and I don't play with it. But the bass station was a mark, I suppose, because it kind of gave you the bass line in a usable form. So unlike something like the TB3, which was more, you had preset patterns, and yes, you could make patterns up on it, but it wasn't as flexible as something like the bass station that gave you that kind of grungy, moogie bass style, but much more flexible. And because it was digital, of course, because it was a digital synth, you didn't lose it, it didn't detune itself, so it became quite stable in a lot of people's gigging rigs, but probably more in the studio rigs. But I suppose the thing to say here is, will this be a marriage that is enduring? Because Focusrite are predominantly a UK-based company, and Sequential are basically a West Coast company. Dave Smith's always been West Coast, and I know from working with in my professional career, working with West Coast companies, that they have a different outlook on how business is meant to be done. However, having said that, a lot of West Coast companies are moving away from the West Coast because of the whole tax regime out in California is not really conducive to getting talent in, because it's too expensive to live there. So a lot of companies, Elon Musk is a really good example of this. Elon Musk is starting to relocate pretty much his whole operation down to Texas now, because of the fact that the whole West Coast area is just becoming too expensive to bring talent into to grow your company. So anyway, it'll be a really interesting marriage. So watch this space, I suppose. Now, one thing you don't see about when I'm working in the goldfish bowls, you don't see over here, which is sort of the window to the kitchen. And underneath the window to the kitchen is a radiator. And it's a double-spaced radiator with a grill on top. And what that actually does is it keeps your cup of tea really warm. And it also means it's nowhere near the synthesizers, because you know I have this rule about really not having drinks around keyboards because of past misdemeanors. Anyway, this is the bit where I do the channel self-promotion. So we have to do this because this is how the channel earns some money. But feel free to whiz through it if you like, but please don't. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not hit the subscribe icon? If you want to be notified, say about when videos hit the channel, save some time, hit the bell icon at the same time. You'll be notified every time I post a video, if you want to be, of course. If you like the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to leave comments, please do. I read all the comments and I respond to all the comments, and sometimes I even make videos about the comments. So please leave comments down below. It's always really interesting to see what you think of some of the videos. And finally, down there somewhere is going to be the address of the TMTG community. Join up for the price of less than the price of a cup of coffee. It's not the price of a cup of coffee, it's less than the price of a cup of coffee. You can support this channel and keep it rocking and rolling. And finally, are the Instagram, Facebook, or maybe Instagram and Facebook, I'm not sure which way around they are when they come on screen, tags, which is where the channel promotion and notices appear. So pop over there and tag me, or whatever it's now called, and follow me over there, because that's where things will be notified. Now, back to this particular video. You catch me having another slurp of my tea. It's really actually quite thirsty out here this morning. I'm not quite sure why, whether it's the heat of the radiator or something else that's going on, but I'm quite thirsty. Anyway. Maybe I'll cut that bit out. Anyway, I think this is the last bit. Yeah, this is the last bit of this rant. So the final bit for this week's rant is kind of around a shortage of chips. And again, Behringer put out a statement regarding the acquisition of silicon. So for those that don't know, silicon is what you make a chip out of, and chips go into synthesizers to make synthesizers work. A number of car manufacturers have also put out statements relating to the acquisition of silicon. Because obviously, pretty much everything in the world nowadays has a silicon chip in it of some description. From computers that have silicon chips in to do processing, to washing machines and tumble dryers that are sitting behind me. They have silicon chips in to control the logic of how the washing cycle works. Anyway, everything pretty much has a silicon chip in it. And basically, the issue is that the coronavirus has pretty much locked down countries that supply silicon chips. So the supply chain is starting to be disruptive. Brad from Euler Instruments has also posted a statement on their Instagram feed saying they had enough chips to secure and complete the current production runs on the S2400. But once that was done, they had no more chips. So they basically have about 100 S2400s in surplus. So, but once they're gone, and he can't restock the production line until the supply of chips becomes available. So, if you want an S2400 and you haven't already ordered your S2400, I suggest you sort of get on the Euler Instruments webpage and order it, because if you don't order it soon and you don't grab one of those 100 units, I can assure you, you won't be getting your S2400 for quite a while because of this supply chain issue. But what does this really mean? Well, unless you've been living in the dark ages for the last few years, you know that most silicon comes from the Far East. It comes from China and Taiwan and a bunch of other countries in that sort of area. That's where these factories have been set up, and they are experiencing massive disruption in to industry and infrastructure due to the high levels of corona that's been going around. Now, I know in the UK our corona levels are going down, but in places like India, the coronavirus levels are shooting up at a rapid pace of knots. And there's a new virus strain, I think it's called the Indian variant, that we are kind of monitoring over here. But in India, it's just rampant, apparently. It really is rampant. But out in that sort of area of the world, it's causing the factories to have to, one, shut down. That's one of the biggest issues, is the factories are actually having to shut down because the employees can't go there because you can't work in close quarters. So that's one reason. Another reason is actually the raw materials have to get to the factory, and if they can't get transported into the factory, you can't make anything out of them. And the third thing that's going on is once you've made it, you've got to get it out of the country. And if you've got fewer supply routes going in and out of the country, so when you go into pandemic or epidemic or whatever you want to call it, like the UK did, you start to strip back the international supply lines to those that are essential. And I'm not saying that silicon chips aren't essential, but in terms of things like making sure you've got medical supplies and food and other things that keep your population alive and healthy, moving goods in and out of the country becomes sort of a kind of secondary thing, and therefore you change your supply routes and passenger planes don't fly, and if passenger planes don't fly, then the cargo capacity goes down on those sort of things, and you're then reliant on road, rail and sea freight, if you get my drift. Anyway, got an itchy nose. This is therefore going to have a knock-on effect when the prices are, and you're going to see the prices of silicon rise, because that's what happens when you have a scarce resource. Prices go up. We saw it in when the UK went into the height of the pandemic and we didn't have enough PPE, so the government had procured PPE, but it had to pay more money for PPE because everybody was trying to procure PPE. So this means manufacturers have a few choices. The first one is whether high prices for the components should be passed on to the consumer in terms of increased cost of product. I can see a number of manufacturers doing that. This policy, of course, fuels inflation, which is something nations don't want, as it hinders recovery out of a recession that's been caused by a pandemic. So really, they don't really want inflation. It's not a good thing for countries, but manufacturers may feel the need to pass those costs on because obviously they still need to make a profit because they have shareholders and they have employees and they have bills to pay. Like Euler Instruments have stated, they're actually going to withdraw their product from market until they can actually get the supply of components re-established. So in the case of things like Behringer and another set of other manufacturers, they may actually delay the launch of product. And this kind of brings me into, will we ever see the RD-9? Because the RD-9, obviously, we've had a number of updates to the RD-8 over the last couple of weeks. There's been at least two. Because of that, we were all expecting the RD-9 to quickly follow on. And I think Behringer will probably delay the release of the RD-9 until they can assure supply. So, you've got that kind of thing going on. And then we then have the point of whether prices rise but keep product prices static. So the manufacturers take the hit. And I can't really see that one occurring. I think if this had been a short-term thing, like any supply chain where prices in the supply chain fluctuate, you don't necessarily change the price of your product. You build in enough margin in the product to be able to consume those fluctuations. And typically where something goes up, something goes down, so the sort of prices kind of even themselves out. And then once every, I don't know, 6 months or a year or whatever it happens to be, the company then looks at its costings and decides whether there is a wholesale shift that the price needs to go up or the price needs to stay the same. The manufacturers putting prices up is never good for consumers, because consumers, feel that they're being abused, I suppose is a good word, in terms of loyalty for buying through that manufacturer's brand. And then sometimes they will actually choose to go to another manufacturer's brand because of the price increase. Now, the problem in the synthesizer market is, there's not very many manufacturers out there that actually produce the thing you want. So you're kind of rather stuffed on that. And number two, if you're kind of bought into the Korg or the Roland way of doing things, or the Yamaha way of doing things, or the Sequential way of doing things, you're going to kind of stick with it, whatever. So I suppose in the synthesizer and the electronic music industry, you're kind of stuffed. If the price is going to go up, the prices are going to go up. I can't see after this sort of, I suppose it's probably going to be 2 years by the time things start to return to normal and factories start up. I can't see manufacturers taking that amount of loss on the chin. I really can't. They're going to be wanting to get as much money, as much margin out of the products as they can. And I think you're probably going to see, once we come out of this, I think we're going to see some fairly aggressive advertising campaigns. I think we're going to see a bunch of new products hit the markets. I think they're going to be trying to get money out of the musician. But we'll just have to see how that works out. But honestly, the cash has to flow through the supply chain. Cash is always king in these situations. If you haven't got cash, you can't pay your suppliers, you go out of business. It doesn't matter how profitable you actually are. So there you go, supply of chips. And I'll just read you this. A friend of mine that works in the fashion industry told me that their factory based in India is shut for the 3rd time. And this time they will run out of stock within weeks. So pretty much they will not be able to carry on selling within weeks of me making this video, unless they can start getting goods from their factory in India. They've tried to source this stuff from other places in the world, and the problem they have is, and you don't kind of really think about this, but if you're a fashion house and you're making up garments, you've got to make sure you've got the right materials in the right places within the world to be able to do that. So in their factory in India, or their 2 factories in India, I think they've got, they've got all the raw materials are there. All the buttons, all the zips, all the, fabrics, trims, whatever else it happens to be, they're all there. And to try and get them from there to somewhere else in the world, and then tool up the other place in the world with your patterns, is a really, really massive task. But they are, they were telling me that they're going to run out of stock, and that's it. They've kind of got to shut up shop at that point. So that could be business over. So the synth industry is not so bad, as you can still buy synths. Hell. So the question is, will the RD-9 ever turn up?